Please fill out the Cooking Lab demonstration sheet as you watch, and you can follow along with the Cinnabons recipe. So I'm going to start off by saying that this is going to be a 2-day lab in class. What I'm showing you right now is day 1, or part 1 of the recipe, and that's how to make the cinnamon bun dough. So, the ingredients to make the cinnamon bun dough are as follows. The dry ingredients are sugar, flour, baking powder, and salt. Wet ingredients, or moist ingredients, will be butter and milk. Now, the first thing I'm going to go over is the equipment used for making cinnamon buns. So, you need wax paper, custard cup, a sifter, a liquid measuring cup, dry measuring cup, measuring spoons, a pastry blender, a mixing bowl, wooden spoon, thin spatula, and a cutting mat. Step 1 tells you to sift 2 heaping cups of flour onto wax paper. Now the reason for this is because you're using 2 cups of sifted flour for this recipe. So you need to sift the flour first, then measure the 2 cups out. So you're going to line the counter with wax paper. And I'm going to take my flour, and I'm going to simply scoop out, take 2 heaping cupfuls of flour, and I'm going to sift it onto my wax paper like this. So pour it in. That's 1 cup. I'm going to sift that. So that's 1, and you're going to do this a second time. Heaping cupful of flour, pass it through the sifter. And now I want you to take a look at the difference in the texture. Notice that the flour is now light and powdery. And from this point, I'm going to now measure out my 2 cups. So I'll take my spoon and I'll spoon in 2 cups of sifted flour, just like I normally would. So this is 1 cup leveled into the mixing bowl, 2 cups, level it into the mixing bowl, and all of the excess or the extra flour, you can now pour it back into the container. So by folding the wax paper in half, just going to lift it up and pour the rest back into the container. That's step 1 and 2. Step 3 says to sift the baking powder, sugar, and salt into the flour. So I'm going to take my baking powder, scoop the baking powder out, and we're using 1 tablespoon. I'll level this off, back into the canister, and I'm going to pour this into the sifter. Next, I'm going to sift my salt, which we're using half of a teaspoon. Half teaspoon. Again, measure away from the bowl, so you're not pouring extra salt. You can lightly shake the excess. Pass that through the sifter. And lastly, our sugar. We're using 2 teaspoons of sugar. So again, you can just scoop the sugar out since it's granular. Tap the excess. This is 1. Pour that through. And 2 teaspoons. And then we're going to combine all of the dry ingredients using a wooden spoon. And that's step 3. Step 4 says to cut in the butter into the sifted ingredients until the flour is crumbly. So you'll be using half a stick of butter, or 4 tablespoons. And notice that the butter is already cut into small pieces. What you're going to do to cut in the butter is use a pastry blender. So you're going to drop a few pieces of butter at a time, and you're going to use a pastry blender to cut in the butter until you have a nice crumbly mixture. Okay, you could use the wooden spoon to get the excess, the extra butter out of the pastry blender. And you're going to keep cutting it until you have a crumbly mixture. So I'll add a little more butter at a time until I've used up the half stick or the 4 tablespoons. You'll see what that'll look like in just a moment. Notice how the flour is now crumbly. It's no longer powdery and light as it was before. That's because all of the butter has now been cut in. So at this point, you're going to now make a little well or a hole in the middle of the flour, and you're going to pour your 3/4 cup of milk right into the well. Stir using the wooden spoon, and you'll see the dough beginning to form. Pause. This is the dough once formed. If you feel that the dough is a little sticky, you can add a tablespoon of flour to the mixture until it's no longer sticking to the sides of the bowl. Okay? Step 6 says to turn the dough onto a lightly floured surface. So I'm going to now pour or take a few tablespoons of flour, 1 or 2 tablespoons of flour, and sprinkle it on the cutting mat. So I'm sprinkling it here, spreading it around. You also want to get a little bit of flour onto your hands because you're going to pick up the dough from the bowl and begin to knead. So you're going to turn the dough out onto the floured surface and begin to knead about 10 to 15 times until the dough is nice and soft. So to knead, you're going to fold, push, and turn the dough. Remember these 3 words: fold, push, turn. Fold, push, turn. Fold, push, turn. Again, about 10 to 15 times until the dough is nice and soft. Here's the dough once it's fully kneaded, about 10 to 15 times. It's nice and soft. Now, step number 8, or the end of day 1, you're going to now store the dough for tomorrow or the next day's lab. So you're going to take a little bit of cooking spray, spray the inside of your group's Ziploc bag, And you're going to place the dough inside the bag, close it, press out any air, and zip it tight. Label it with your period and your kitchen lab number.